My cousin dragged me here. I wasn't really sure why, but he said you wouldn't want to miss this parade. Oh yeah, I've heard of this Jesus guy from Galilee. I've heard people talking, people that came to Jerusalem from Capernaum. I guess they were listening to him teach. I guess people are coming from all over. They want to hear him. And some of them want to get up close and personal with him, because word on the street is that he's healed some people, and he might have even brought someone back to life. All I know is that the stories must be spreading, because there's a huge turnout of Roman soldiers here. And I guess they're going to check it out. The authorities must be getting nervous. My cousin says this could be it. This could be our ticket out of this Roman occupation. And he's hoping that people will be marching alongside Jesus. And maybe there'll be a display of power from Jesus. That'll get the people to rally. We got here early to get a good spot. We didn't want to be down on the road. We thought up here on the roof might be a better spot to get a good look. And guess what? If trouble starts, I'm out of here. A little distance is okay with me. Well, you might think that I don't want to see change happen, but that's not true. A lot of us Jews, we're sick of paying taxes to Caesar. He controls everything with his lackey Pilate. Well, I am a little bit afraid that things are going to get stirred up. And they might get worse, not better. Truth is, I'm afraid of just being here. People might start calling me a protester or a rebel rouser. I've seen what they do to their political rivals. People that question their power, their divine right over all things, all people, all matters of life and death. And then I see Jesus. And he's not riding on a horse, girded with a sword. He's riding on a donkey.
Well, how strange is it to begin Lent with Palm Sunday? It seems very strange. But what an opportunity we have this Lent to really delve deep into that last week of Jesus' life. So tonight we're focusing on Jesus' procession into Jerusalem, his victory parade. But I'm not sure if you realize that there were two processions that entered Jerusalem that day. One procession featured Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, and the other Jesus. Well, every year Pontius Pilate would go to Jerusalem specifically so that he could be present for the Passover. And the reason for this was that in the Passover, the Jewish people were celebrating their freedom from Egypt. It was a historical event, but they're celebrating it and reliving the day that God brought freedom to their people. And so it was also a time then when they expressed their desire to be free of Rome. Rome had conquered them, come in war and totally obliterated their culture, taken over their country. So it was a time of unrest, this Passover festival. Jerusalem's population would go from 50,000 to at least 200,000. A lot of people in an unpredictable, dangerous mood. It was a powder keg ready to go off. So the Roman governor, Pilate, would come and he would flex his muscles a little bit. He wanted to make sure that the Jews remembered that Rome was in charge. Pilate entered the city with a cavalry of horses with foot soldiers and weapons and golden eagles mounted on poles, marching feet and beating drums to remind the Jews that they could remember this ancient victory against Egypt if they wanted to. But present day, real resistance, if anyone was daring to consider it, Rome was watching. And Pilate was very willing to shed as much blood as he needed to keep control. So against this backdrop, Pilate coming in from the west side of Jerusalem, we have Jesus coming in from the east side. And Jesus doesn't enter Jerusalem in military might with horses and pounding feet and beating drums. Jesus entered Jerusalem in protest. He was protesting against the violence and the oppression and the abuse that Rome was visiting upon his people. So as Pilate clanged and clashed his way into Jerusalem from the west, Jesus approached from the east, and he chose to enter the city riding the most unthreatening, most unmilitary mount imaginable, a female donkey with her colt trotting right along beside her. Pilate's procession announced violence and oppression. Jesus' procession announced that he would be a non-violent king who would bring true peace to the world. So in contrast to the peace of Rome, that's what they called it, the Roman world came into the cities and they established what they called the peace of Rome, which basically meant violence and blood and oppression. In contrast to that was the peace of Christ that was accomplished through liberty and freedom for the people. Jesus came that day not as a ruler to be served, but to serve. Not to wield power by the sword, but to wield the power of God's mercy. Jesus entered Jerusalem to show us the deep and abundant love that God has for all people, to show us that violence is not the way and that hate will not have the last word. Jesus entered Jerusalem offering healing and reconciliation, hope and justice. So where are you in this protest march of Jesus? If I'm going to be completely open, I'd have to tell you that I would not be in the middle of that crowd yelling. I would be too afraid. Powder keg ready to go off. I'm slightly claustrophobic. I would not be in the middle of that crowd. Some people have the ability to put themselves out there and to proclaim to the world what they believe. And there's a part of me that admires that. I admire the people that went on the race walks and marches during the 50s and the 60s. I admire the people who were able to say it's all right for women to be ordained, and they fought for it. But oftentimes I see two sides, and I see grays, and I'm never quite sure, am I right? Is what I believe right? And so I'm not one to put myself out there. So does that make me a bad person? Well, I don't think so. I think God has given all of us differing abilities. And some people are given that staunch ability to be able to stand up for what is right and to stand against things that are wrong. But if you put a suffering person in front of me, I will do absolutely everything that I can do to help that person. I cry out for justice in my own way. So I might be on the fringes of that crowd, but that doesn't make me any less part of the parade. So what about you? Jesus wants us to add our voices to the chorus calling for justice. Jesus has a vision where justice rolls and flows like rivers, where all parched places flourish. And he's not talking about rivers and deserts. He's talking about our world. He wants to save us from pain, from despair, from loneliness, poverty, cruelty. Jesus wants us to help transform this world by our words and our actions. So what is your Rome? What holds you back and holds you down? Jesus wants to free you from that. What oppressions dominate our world and make people suffer? Jesus wants to free us from that. From what do we need to be saved today? Jesus came to free you from all that burdens you. Jesus came to break the chains of fear and of shame and of hate and of despair, all those things that hold you back and isolate you and make you feel less than. Jesus came to free our world from violence and injustice, and that's what this parade is all about. And we're invited to join the parade in however we've been called, celebrating, proclaiming, and experiencing a world filled with hope and freedom, justice, mercy, love, joy, kindness, and peace that only Christ can bring. So where are you in the story? Amen.